That was a new countdown. If you guys were watching that live with those picture quotes in the countdown, that was new. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We're glad that you're here. Super glad to be back. This show is live, really live again, and that feels good. We had a couple weeks off. I'm back, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to talk about some very interesting things. The things we're going to talk about are the arrangement of teaching sites in the afterlife, what heavenly teaching feels like, and the paths to heaven. Wow, that is a big bill to fill, and we're going to do it with the help of Swedenborg. I'm Curtis from the Swedenborg Foundation, which is a nonprofit that gets Swedenborg's ideas, his recorded experiences out into the conversation, and with me is translator Kara Dom. She's here. We had her last week, and this is sort of part 2 of the learning chapter, so we're super glad to have her back. Kara, thanks for hanging out.
Happy to be here, Curtis. Thanks for having me.
All right. Okay, so you guys can all join along, join in and read along. Our text is Swedenborg's Our Life After Death, which is downloadable here as a PDF. It's in the description of the video, so if you guys just click that little box, below YouTube where it's happening, that can happen. You can get one. All right, so we've got that. I think that's all of our text stuff. We always try to get our minds right, into the right state of mind. Swedenborg, his most popular book was Heaven and Hell. And that's not just an afterlife state, that is the two states that our mind can exist in, heaven or hell. So let's just talk about those a little bit. Kara, if you're willing, would you say a little bit about what's the kind of mindset that Swedenborg describes as being heaven?
A heavenly mindset would be one where you're open to what God has to offer, you're in consideration of the people around you, you're wishing well to others, you're wanting to do good and helpful things for people.
Nice. I think that's very well summarized, and we're going to take a look especially at usefulness, as it pertains to that coming up. All right, and so that's the one we try to tune into, and then usually we do these in the opposite order, but I flipped it this time. Everything is brand new and we're live. So what's the side we have to kind of push out? What's sort of the hellish side of the mindset as Swedenborg describes it?
The hellish side would be like a lot of concern about self, maybe fear of, for instance, what other people are thinking of you, judgment of others, feeling superior to others, self-centeredness.
Absolutely. So the more we can all monitor ourselves for that, both in this broadcast, but more importantly in life, the better that we can kind of push that influence away, which opens us up to the heavenly influence. So the minds are right, the tech is right, everything's good. Let's dive in to our text for this evening. All right, so we're on page 79. We are very close to the end of this book. I can't believe we made it through the whole thing. Yeah, we skipped a little bit, but that happens from time to time. So we're dropping right in the middle of a chapter. Watch our episode from last week if you want to see the beginning of the chapter. This is talking about the third state after death and the sites of teaching in the afterlife. And we're going to drop into where he's talking about how those teaching sites are arranged. The general arrangement is as follows. Toward the front are people who died in childhood and were educated in heaven up to the age of early adolescence. Okay, so right there, he says toward the front. Like that's a very strange way to describe geography. I was in Australia, and I noticed that toward the front there were a lot of universities. So Kara, why is he describing the geography of the afterlife in those terms, or is that something he does commonly?
He often describes the afterlife geography, but usually he's using in terms like east and west and north and south. But sometimes he does refer to the front and the back, and I'm not sure whether he's talking about, it seems like he's referring to his own body in relation to his own body. Sometimes he talks about a spirit approaching him from the left and to the back or something like that. So I'm not exactly sure what the front means, but it probably has something to do with orientation toward love or orientation toward truth or something like that.
Yeah, and it can be confusing because he will describe things in terms, he'll say like, yeah, it's a spirit approached me above the plane of the left eye, and it all has a lot of meaning, but yeah, it can be, sometimes he doesn't make it entirely clear whether he's talking about where's our frame of reference? Is it Swedenborg? Is it some kind of north you're represented from? So very interesting, and part of, I guess, him trying to describe something, a world that isn't bound by the laws of space and time in terms that we can understand here in space and time. Okay, so let's take a look back at our PDF. So, educated in heaven up to the age of early adolescence, women instruct them during their childhood, and then they are brought to this location by the Lord and taught here. Behind these and farther to the north, there are sites for instruction of various non-Christian people. In the world, okay, and so we better just mention, because probably that's going to be a flag. Like, what do you mean non-Christian people? Like, does it matter whether you're a Christian or not? What are the? So he does describe a little bit of here, you know, in these instruction sites, sort of religious affiliation. People are grouped according to that, and I think that. You know, we better just bring some attention to it. It seems in what follows that he's mainly talking about people are grouped with people who have a like mindset because everyone's instructed according to how they learn. Cara, does that seem fair?
Yeah, I think so. He goes on to describe that these are all good people who've been living according to their beliefs of their faith. So, yeah.
Yeah, and because the mindset sticks with you. He says that we sort of bring the same mind initially into the afterlife. So people who are entrenched in a particular worldview, you know, learn at first within that. And anyway, you'll see it. I don't need to preface it too much, but he talks a lot about accommodation, and that accommodation, you know, like in schools, you know, parents will complain if the curriculum isn't suited well to the way their child learns. Well, they would love this, how this all works, because it's very much student specific. So I just wanted to get that out there. Okay, in the world they lived good lives in accordance with their own religion, acquired some degree of conscience, and behaved fairly and honestly. They did so not because of the laws of their nation, but because of the laws of their religion, since they believed that these laws were to be reverently obeyed, and that nothing they did should violate them. And I just want to, he often talks about, you know, not doing it for external laws of civil laws, but rather for spiritual laws. And that also sort of has shades of not doing it so you won't get caught, but just doing it because it's the right thing to do. Okay, all these people are readily brought to recognize the Lord when they have been taught to do so, because at heart they believe that God is not invisible, but visible in human form. And this is a big part of Swedenborg. The idea of a God you can relate to was a big thing for Swedenborg, and he says that there's even sort of like if you you know, if you watch you know, all kinds of movies, Bruce Almighty, Evan Almighty, other classics like that. God is like God is Morgan Freeman in that one, but he's a person. You can talk to God, and the Swedenborg says that sort of inherent in a good heart, there's sort of an image of that. So that's the way he puts it. And there's one little tiny paragraph here that's interesting. The non-Christians outnumber all the others in the instructional sites, which makes sense because there's a big world out there. Those from Africa are especially good people. And Cara, that's an interesting concept, or an interesting point that he makes there, especially for his time period, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't really research how people felt about Africa in the 1700s, but he does often say in his great, he wrote a lot, and he says a bunch of times that Africans have a special, they're inwardly spiritual more than others, that they have an inner sight and an inner judgment. In one place he describes Africans as having a celestial nature or a heavenly nature. And that they're very good at living according to their religion and its laws. So that's just interesting. I don't know how common that was in the world at that time.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like Europe at that time was super. Hey, everyone's great. It's not us, you know. So it's just kind of cool that he was transcending a little bit there. All right, so let's take a look at our PDF. Not everyone is taught in the same way or by the same communities of heaven. People who have been raised in heaven from infancy, so that would be infants who had died in this world, are taught by angels of the inner heavens because they have not absorbed false ideas from distorted religions or polluted their spiritual life with a residue of rank and wealth in the world. So what residue is he talking about there, Cara? What is this rank and wealth?
The residue of rank and wealth. So rank, he's talking about like honor, status, a status symbol.
So not a smell, but like
no, not like
okay.
rank stink,
Right.
but like rank, your position in the world. And the residue, the Latin word there for residue is crassamenta, which is like the dregs. It's like the leftovers, the dirt, the sediment. And the rank and wealth, the status and riches, those are both reflections of what Swedenborg describes as the two main evils, which is a over love of self and an over love of worldly possessions. So the status or the rank would be that love of self gone awry, and the love of riches would be that love of materialism gone awry.
Right, and whatever those form the head, as he says, when that becomes your primary focus, enough that you would harm the rest of the human race to get that can be a problem. I was thinking crassamenta, that would be my, if I was a villain, like a superhero villain, that would be my name, I think.
That's great. A good one.
So we're back live, and I just want to say there's a couple things that come with that. One is we want to hear your comments and questions, so please go ahead and leave those, and we'll be getting in a little while to some questions as you guys leave them, because we're here discussing this, but we want to hear what you have to say too. And not to mention, when this is technically a discussion group, and although it's Cara and I on camera with some questions, you guys, we want you to be talking about this in the discussion forum there. If you're watching it on YouTube, or if you found it on Facebook, you don't have a YouTube account, leave your comments there. Obviously we don't hold all the keys, to knowledge. Nobody does. So we want to hear, your experiences, what you think about things, and kind of have you guys shooting ideas to each other at the same time. It just makes for more fun. All right. Speaking of fun, let's take a look at page 79 at the very bottom. Most people who have died as adults are taught by angels of the outermost heaven, because these angels are better suited to them than are the angels of the heavens farther in. The latter, that is, the more inward angels, focus on a deeper wisdom that the deceased cannot yet accept. And this is more of that accommodation that we see. Some angels are so deep into it, they don't really relate as well anymore. We can't pick up what they're putting down, as they say. Teaching in the heavens differs from teaching on earth, because information there is not incorporated into one's memory, but into one's way of life. Since spirit's memory is in their life, they take in and retain whatever agrees with their way of life, and do not take in, much less retain, whatever does not agree with it. This is because spirits actually are affections, and so they are in a human form that resembles their affections. So there's a lot going on in that paragraph, but Cara, so he says halfway through that spirit's memory is in their life. What is he talking about when he says that?
Well, Swedenborg puts a lot of emphasis on the fact that what's important is not what we say or what we think, but what we do. So if we know a lot, we're really smart, but we don't put it into action in our life, apply it to the way we behave towards other people, then it's not worth very much. So to have the memory being their life means what they know is really how they're living. They're walking the talk.
Yeah, and that's kind of who he says they are their affections. And it's sort of that there's no, and we talked in earlier episodes about pretense, and that they're in the afterlife, after an initial period, there's no more ability to say one thing, but really inside you're another. So that kind of goes with that. But there's more about that you really become an embodiment of a certain way of looking at life, a certain way of living. You are that there. So I find that interesting, and I don't fully understand it, but I understand a little bit of it, and that qualifies me to run this show. Okay, moving on. Since this is the way they are constantly inspired with a desire to know what is true so they can put it to use in their lives. The Lord, in fact, sees to it that they love doing the useful things that suit their personal gifts. that love is intensified by their hope of becoming angels. And you know that's pretty good, you know, positive reinforcement training. You know that it's not like you better learn this stuff or else. This is I'm going to show you how cool this can be, and that pumps people up to learn more. So that's a few things Swedenborg said, a few things Cara said. Probably I should be letting her say more things. A few things that a lot of things that I've said, but we want to hear some things that you have said. Let's get to a few questions, comments, etc. Our first one comes from YouTube, and it's from Will. If people are attracted after death to a heaven or a hell based on what they resonate with or feel comfortable with, how do spirits evolve? If I was a psychopath in my life bent on serving only myself at the expense of everyone else, then die and go to a place full of such spirits, how do I ever get out of there? Do I eventually get sick of seeing myself mirrored back to me and actually seek spiritual help? That's a great question. It's a good thought on it. He's referencing, we talked in other weeks about that process. An initial thought is that, yeah, I mean, so Swedenborg does describe some people who are hard-headed and don't want to change. But there's also, there is a lot of sort of reformative processes we had talked about being shattered either last week or a week ago, that people go through these experiences, and from that they sort of throw off things that they had been in, or even people who don't want to pick up good at least don't do the evil things they did before. And I would think if you're around people like yourself and you're a psychopath, you start to understand how much it sucks to have psychopaths messing with you all the time. So you start to understand, start to gain a sense of horror at what the things you're harboring inside. That's an initial thought of mine. Cara, could you please rescue this for me?
I think that as long as there's a desire to change in the spiritual world, then change is possible. It's when there's total contentment to be what you are and you're not interested in change, then you're done.
Yeah, and that these sort of experiences, the providence, or the divine guidance of life is happening there as it is here. Here, the experiences we have are wake-up calls in some situations, and that there you have a similar thing, where I'm going to guide you into a society with people like you, and this is going to be the hope that you'll make some good choices there based on these interactions. So excellent thoughts, Will. Excellent thoughts, Cara. I'll work on mine a little bit. All right, let's get to our next one. Deidre from YouTube. Deidre from YouTube. From listening to you, I take it that each person has to become completely pure in heart and mind before entering the third state, which is heaven. So can this process take years to happen? And once they are there, can they communicate with their loved ones back on Earth? Or can this be done even before entering heaven? Thanks. So these are deep questions today. Mm-hmm. So he talks about the third state of heaven, and Swedenborg describes 3 levels of the mind. And we all have these 3 levels in our mind, and the opening of them is what creates this state, which is heaven, which is this thing you enter in the afterlife. So I would say nobody's ever perfectly good. I mean, we all, even all your vices, and or I should say all of my vices and everything like that, stay with us even in that state. But the state of heaven is having those put to sleep, and having the good things activated. So even angels, Swedenborg also describes as going through periods of sort of cycles as well, doesn't he, Cara?
He does. He does talk about morning states and evening states. The ups and downs. Nobody's perfect but God. So I do think that there's still a rhythm of good times and not so good times.
Yeah, and that you mentioned morning and even, and he says that actually those states in the other life, where we're in more darkness or more light, are what correspond, and we'll talk about correspondences at the end, are what correspond with the states here on Earth of actual morning, noon, evening, and night. So it's interesting. And then there was a question about communication. And Swedenborg is pretty skimpy on the info about communication. And I've been talking to somebody today about that in his day, I think after death communication wasn't as common as it is now. He was talking about that the state of spirituality on Earth and even the state of the spiritual world was a lot more congested and messed up back then. And I don't know, maybe everyone, but it seems like now there's so much communication going on with everyday people that he just doesn't give a lot about when you can communicate and when you can't. Although it does seem like it would interact a little bit with, we talked about before, people being taught by the third. The third state angels can't always teach as well as the first state because the first state's closer to us. So maybe when people move on and on, it's harder for them. But he also talks about intermediary spirits that help mediate the message. Okay, that's enough from me. So the answer is maybe. Okay, we have one more. This is from Wilsmar. So what is the Swedenborg religious group called? Are you like a different version of Christianity or something else? Yeah, so Cara, did Swedenborg ever found a church?
Swedenborg did not found a church. He referred to this sort of new this revelation, these new ideas about Christianity as a new church, like a new slant on Christianity.
Yeah, and even in the way that he describes churches, it's primarily an internal phenomenon, right? That the church is actually a way of looking at the world and a way of acting in love. So he didn't found a church. There were readers of his works afterwards, formed religious organizations. But even some people call it Swedenborgian. But I remember reading a letter. I don't know, Cara, did you ever see this when somebody had called his work Swedenborgianism, and he said they call it Swedenborgianism, but I say it's true Christianity. So he didn't like that label, Swedenborgianism. So I don't know. Not everyone's a total follower of Swedenborg. Some people think he's cool. Some people think he's really cool. But you can call him whatever you want. There are churches. Some churches call themselves Swedenborgian. Some churches call themselves the New Church. So there's I guess you could call that an answer. Right. So that was fun, guys. Keep asking. Don't let my inability to connect everything deter you. We like hearing that. Can you keep those questions and comments coming, and we'll get to more in a little bit. Plus, please help us. If you're sitting at your computer, only if you actually are enjoying this, can you please click the like button on this video? Just right now, click like, because that will make YouTube like our video more, and then more people who are searching around for things will find it, and then they hopefully will like it. So very much appreciated if you'd click that, but don't do it if you don't like it, because then that's not very spiritual. Okay, so let's get back to our text. We're at the PDF page 80 of Our Life After Death. Furthermore, everything done in heaven is focused on each person's being of use for one shared goal, which is the good of the Lord's kingdom, which is now their country. Since all angels there are useful in their own distinctive ways to the extent that the things they do are focused directly and personally on that common usefulness, or you could say the common good. Each and every one of the countless distinctive and individual uses they fulfill is good and heavenly. This means that for each of these spirits, their affection for what is true is so closely joined to their affection for usefulness that the two affections act together. A true understanding of usefulness is sown in them in this way, so that the truths they learn are the truths about what is useful. This is how angelic spirits are taught and prepared for heaven. So I think that's a cool paragraph, and I think there's a lot in there. But it's kind of this picture of heaven, and I'd said in the beginning that we're going to talk about usefulness as being this part of heaven. Usefulness being a love of doing things because you know they're helping, basically. So, Cara, what did you think about that paragraph and the ideas contained within there?
I love that paragraph. To me, it feels like such a relief, like the thought that if maybe in the next life I will really be in a place that has a job just for me. No one else is going to do it. I'm going to be perfectly educated. I'm going to have the perfect education to do that job just right, and so is everybody else. The concept of that kind of full immersion in something that's satisfying and good for the rest of the world. Just sounds so great. I hear from people all the time who feel like, what am I doing here? What good is it? What good is it for me to be here? How can I possibly make a difference in this world? So to think in the next world, we'll all get to feel that real sense of vital contribution to the world around us. That just sounds lovely.
Yeah, very well said, and not to underestimate how important it is to all of us to feel needed and feel qualified and useful in some area, and and to be, you sort of mentioned being excited about a project or being excited about what is happening. And Swedenborg is saying here that those are actually foundational joys of heaven. So if you want to get those levels open and get that heavenly mindset, that's you gotta visit that country. All right, excellent, thank you. Let's take a look back at our PDF. Here there are various teaching methods, many of them unknown in the world, by which an affection for the truth, suited to each person's own particular usefulness, like you mentioned, Cara, is instilled in these individuals. Most of these methods involve representations of useful activities. Such representations can be shown in thousands of ways in the spiritual world, and they are so enjoyable and engaging that they soak deep into these spirits, passing all the way from the deeper levels of their minds to the outer levels of their bodies. In this way, the representations have an effect on the entire person. So it seems like he's describing some kind of hyper-effective teaching tool here, Cara. So what do you make of these representations that he's mentioning here?
It's really interesting to me. I mean, this book was published in 1758. To me, it sounds like he's talking about videos, like instructional videos, like documentaries about how to care for the homeless or how to, help people that are feeling lonely or something like that. I don't know what representations mean. But it sounds like some kind of symbolic manifestation, something that people are watching that teaches them, oh, okay, that's what I could do to be helpful. That would really work,
Yeah, and the people, I mean, documentaries which have cropped up since then certainly can have a big impact here. Like there's some that have really changed the discussion around certain issues and can really inspire people who have seen something and been really inspired about it. So it could be some kind of spiritual video, and don't worry everyone, it'll be a lot different than this video that you're watching right now. It'll be significantly better, and that's a promise. So I also want to say, since we're back live and we have this audience here, and you notice that hopefully that at the beginning I said we're getting close to the end of this book. So that, like, until now in this show we've had our work given to us. We know, okay, we read the first half of this chapter, now we read the second half. But once we get to the end, hopefully we'll want to keep doing this because I'm having fun doing it. What would you guys like to hear about? Swedenborg wrote about all kinds of topics. I mean, obviously a lot of afterlife stuff, a lot of human mind kind of stuff, religious texts kind of stuff, all kinds of things. What is interesting to you? So if there's something you would be interested in seeing a show about, just write it down as a comment here, and we'll get to it. We'll be looking over the next couple weeks as we wrap up this book and gathering ideas for what we could do. So please go ahead and write that down, and keep your questions and comments coming because we're going to take a look at those in just 2 paragraphs from now. In the meantime, let's return to our text. The result is that spirits virtually become the useful activities they personally do. So when they arrive in the communities for which their instruction has prepared them and begin engaging in those useful activities, there they are fully living the lives that are theirs alone. And that does have that, like, that fulfillment. Oh, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. Isn't that interesting that we here as humans, these creatures on this planet, do have this deep desire and need to feel like I'm in the right spot. Like, this is where I belong. This is what I'm made for. And that's kind of, he's saying, hey man, there's a reason you feel like that, and it's a need that's going to be met. We may gather from this that knowledge in itself, which is an outward form of truth, does not get anyone into heaven. Rather, what gets us in is the useful life that is granted through knowledge. And you'll find that as a refrain. Kara, isn't he always talking about, and you even mentioned it earlier in the show, that you know, one quote of his, our knowing much accounts for nothing if we do not live by what we know, right?
That's right. So that's, again, I just love the concept that in heaven, we get to just learn, we get to go to college, we get to take the courses that we can't wait to take, to learn exactly how to do what we are best suited to do. And it's not the knowing it, it's the doing it that's going to make us so happy.
And I think that Swedenborg was in a lot of ways writing with some response to, in his day, there was a lot of, you know, the church was very powerful, and there were a lot of people who had all their theology straight, but yet were really acting in really negative ways. And there's sort of an aspect of that, I feel like, in his writing when he mentions things like this, to say, hey, listen, man, that's not membership to the club is knowing stuff. It's being nice. So, all right, let's see what the audience is thinking about everything. We have a couple more questions here. This is from Denny on YouTube. How can we have proof or witness that our family is in the spirit world? And that is a great question, because isn't that like what really ties people to this idea of life after death? I think a lot of people, oh yeah, is there a life after death? Is there not? I don't know. I mean, I'm just gonna live. But then somebody's gone, and you want to know where are they? You know, and then people start seeking and looking for things. And I think that a lot of people receive after-death communications from loved ones. Cara, have you ever heard of people getting sort of like a visit or a voice in their ear or something like that?
I've heard a lot of stories about that, the sense of the presence of someone they love, or just like some kind of almost dreamlike thing that they see them and feel comforted by their presence. It usually seems to be just a message about love. I don't know if we can say that you can find proof of it. I think that's why things like Swedenborg and other writers of about near-death experience are so appealing to the masses, is because it seems to be evidence that there is something beyond, that these people that we love are still alive and still in happy, functional lives.
Yeah, and it's very interesting, because with this issue, you get some people who have had these experiences and are very convinced in the reality of the afterlife. They'll actually say that this life is less real than that. But then on the other side, you have us who are hoping but not sure. And I do come across a lot of people who, you know, there's a lot of people who have lost loved ones and have those connections with them, but there are other people who have lost people that they love and they don't get anything, and they're wondering, why don't I get? And I don't know why that happens. I guess it happens for the same reason that everything in life happens, you know, some reason, you know, like why are some people born rich, why are some people born poor? I don't know how it all works. But what I would say for this particular question is, you know, listen, check for what resonates. You know, I mean, that does mean something, and continue to explore these accounts. Go read all kinds of modern near-death experiences. You know, if you can find anyone that's had an experience, talk to them. You know, that's the way to gain confidence and to kind of connect with it, even if you haven't had that direct connection. So that's what I'd say about that. Thanks very much. Okay, we're going to get to our next question, which is from Rafe GB on YouTube. I've had dreams where I recall a person imparting growth that I can't grasp when I wake. Is it possible that heaven teaches us here if we are open to it? Also, that it is on a higher level of us. Awesome. Great question. Cara, do you have any initial thoughts on it?
Well, I hope that's true. Swedenborg does talk about the spirit world affecting us at all times, that angels are always around us. always pulling us toward goodness and love, always protecting us from malicious feelings or malevolent ideas. I'm not conscious of it in my day-to-day life, but I'm hoping that there's an effect. There's some kind of influence that's happening and that's powerful, even if I am not conscious of where it's coming from.
Yeah. Sorry, I breathed right in the middle of your comment, so the camera clipped onto me and ruined it. But I thought it was good. And what I would say also is that I certainly have had really good dreams where I felt like, oh, something really good is happening here, and you wake up and you just feel like something has really happened. Swedenborg does talk about good dreams coming from heaven, and that this higher level of us that he mentions, that Swedenborg certainly talks about, we have these inner levels of the mind that are in more communication with heaven. So I would think so, and especially another thing I want to point out is if you're having those experiences and that's sort of the conclusion you're coming to, I mean, there's something to that. I mean, that is being whispered in the ear. So I would say, yeah. My answer is yeah. I give it a yeah. Okay. All right. So we are moving on now. There's going to be. Oh no, we're going to take one more question here, and this is from David on YouTube. I think meditation gets us in a spiritual mindset. And from there we are open to receive assurances. It may present itself as a coincidence, but your own spirit will affirm it as a message or a sign. Excuse me. And it may only be realistic to you because it is fashioned for your comprehension. Yeah, so I like that, and that's a good tip, referring to our previous question. This is, I'm saying, is more fun when it's a discussion, because you can ask us and we can say, I don't know, or you can ask each other. Maybe there's someone who's had experience. And yeah, I think definitely I had somebody who I was related to who was, through meditation, started to get messages from somebody they loved who they had died. So it seems like there can be a portal that's open there. All right, excellent. Thank you guys very much for that. We'll have one more batch of questions near the end, so keep them coming and keep chatting with each other and listening a little bit to what we're saying here. So we're going to get back to the PDF. If you're just joining us, you can download it in the link in the description. We're reading through Swedenborg's Our Life After Death. After spirits have been prepared for heaven at these learning sites, which does not take long because they are immersed in spiritual ideas, which efficiently cover many separate concepts at once. I just want to say that you do hear with near-death experiences, people will talk about almost like blocks of knowledge being I don't want to say shoved, but whatever a nicer way to say shoved is, pushed into them all at once, and they suddenly have this huge download of information. So that sounds a little bit like that there can be simultaneous concepts going into it at the same time. Anyway, so they are dressed in angelic clothing, which is usually as white as if it were made of fine linen, which kind of sounds like what an angel might wear based on some descriptions, right?
Yeah, well, that's certainly that sort of concept the world has of angels wearing white, right? I know Swedenborg also talks about, he has a place where he's describing somebody or other wearing red or scarlet. He has spiritual experiences where he attended a wedding in heaven and describes in great detail the clothing that the bride and the groom are wearing. So in general, clothing, though, is a representation of what the person's like. And he says that the clothing that an angel wears, everyone can recognize what a person is like by the clothing they wear. So it's something about mirroring who you really are.
So it's an action. All actions there are full of meaning. So they're wearing the white clothes. It's not just because white is in style that season. It's like this means something. And that you say, yeah, that this is more of that. You are who you appear to be. That even clothes give off some knowledge to those who are tuned into it about the content of your character or what's inside you. All right. So then, after they're dressed in angelic clothing, they are taken to a path that leads up toward heaven and turned over to guardian angels there. After this, they are received by other angels and acquainted with various communities and the great number of blessings in them. The Lord then takes each person to her or his own community. This happens by various paths. sometimes through roundabout routes. No angel knows the paths along which they are taken, only the Lord. When they arrive at their own communities, their inner selves are opened. And since they are in harmony with the inner selves of the angels who are members of that community, they are recognized instantly and received with joy. And Cara, that kind of Swedenborg will often talk about sort of kindred spirits. That I know you had talked about. Oh, I want to go to the place where this is just right for me and I'm useful and everything. But Swedenborg also describes that you'll be with just the people that are right for you to be there with too, right?
Yep, in the place where we're with like-minded, like-hearted people. To me, it sounds like a beautiful description of just coming home. And that's another just core human experience, isn't it? That we just want to feel like we're home. And to me, that's what that paragraph sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that you find it pop up in all kinds of art. This idea of where's my place, and it seems like you really get, if you want to take the heavenly path, you really get this sense of community and belonging that you could never, probably never imagine here. So there we have a little representation of the stages of human life. That riddle, like what has 4 legs in the morning and then 3 legs in the that kind of ruins it, because then you go back to jumping afterwards. So apologies to everyone who really loved that riddle. Let's finish up. We have 2 paragraphs left of this chapter in Swedenborg's statements here on learning in the afterlife. So he says, I would like to add here something remarkable about the paths that lead from these sites to heaven, and the paths by which newly arrived angels are admitted. And I kind of like, he says, I'd like to add something remarkable. You just see his humanity. He's like, I saw this. This is really wild. You got to know about this. There are 8 paths, 2 from each teaching site. One leads up toward the east, and the other toward the west. People who are entering the Lord's heavenly kingdom are admitted by the eastern path, while people who are entering the Lord's spiritual kingdom are admitted by the western path. And so, oh man, I feel like he has these spiritual kingdom and heavenly kingdom, but that's not common terminology. So, Cara, do you have sort of a brief general description of what is the heavenly kingdom and what is the spiritual kingdom?
It seems to be, he describes it in terms of love, that the heavenly or celestial kingdom, the realm, that level of heaven is more about for love orientation, you might say, and the spiritual is more for truth orientation or something like that.
Yeah, and those are kind of 2 forces of heaven. He even, I believe, describes individual communities kind of having some residents who are more in love and some who are more in truth, and that he describes God as being in God there's this marriage, he calls it, of good and truth, and that so there needs to be these different kinds of minds, that some who are truth leaning, some who are love leaning, and that they together can create this unity. So when he's talking about the spiritual kingdom and the heavenly kingdom, that's what he's talking about. And that's what we're here for, is to explain little things like that to the best of our ability. The 4 paths that lead to the Lord's heavenly kingdom are adorned with olive trees and various fruit trees, while the ones that lead to the Lord's spiritual kingdom are adorned with grapevines and laurel. These are correspondences. Vines and laurel correspond to an affection for truth and how it is used, while olive trees and fruit trees correspond to an affection for what is good and how that is used. And this is kind of, he's like the clothes putting on, this is the plants that are there by the paths are meaningful. There's a reason why there's olive trees here, and so everything is very meaningful in that. And we'll talk a little bit more about correspondences right after we get to our last segment of questions. And if you guys are watching this afterwards, not live, feel free to leave questions anyway. We'll get to them later. And also, as I said before, leave topics for future shows. We're going to be soon starting to just be able to choose what our topics are going to be. So if there's something you're interested in, leave it there and we'll get it. Okay, so we have some questions here, and let's take a look. Catherine on YouTube. Wouldn't these useful activities be our loves? If a person truly loved caring for children or gardening, wouldn't that be what they would be doing in the spiritual world? I would say, well, I won't say. Carl, you say if it's right or not.
I think that is, I think, what it's talking about. Although it would, I mean, yeah, I'm just thinking about gardening. I'm sure there's a place where gardening, what would spiritual gardening be? What would planting the soil, what would preparing the soil and planting the seeds be? There are children that will be raised, and how could we be raising children? What would that be, you know, to be concerned with the welfare and the education and the providing good experiences for anybody in our life? Like, I think it's true. There's going to be gardens, and there's going to be books, and there's going to be all kinds of things that we experience in this life. And with just sort of a spiritual level, I'm thinking would be part of that package.
Yeah, I was just going to say yes. But no, I see that the things that we love here, those loves, we don't have those loves for no reason. That they do transfer, and they sort of can, like you're mentioning, they can evolve. That there's, if you love gardening here, which I really need to weed my gardens now that we're mentioning this. Anyway, so that's a tangent. If you love gardening here, that there's gardening, there's something that's gardening there, but then there's a deeper, it's all expanded. Sort of like if you love toy trains here, there's like a whole world for you there, or something. You know what I mean? Like there's an expanded role for that. But certainly, life here, as Cara mentioned, people say, "Why am I here? What are we doing?" The things we gain here don't just go away. So if you love those things, raising children, gardening, I mean he even talks about people who had loved little children in the world, raising children in the next life, children who had died from this world. So absolutely, and I appreciate, Kari, you kind of bringing in that nuance, because it is a good point that the answer is yes and better. You know, yes and better is the final answer. All right, so thanks very much for the question. Let's take a look at the next one. It's from Rafi GB. Again, nice to hear from you. YouTube. One thing I've always wondered is, why are we male or female? It seems as if our gender goes into the spiritual world. And yeah, why are we? As far as why any of us are, who knows? Just because that would be good. But certainly Swedenborg is very clear. Like, okay, who you are continues to the next life, and that includes gender. That you are still you, and so if you're a boy, you're a boy. If you're a girl, you're a girl. So as far as why, I mean, I touched before on, that God is all about sort of conjunction. And that there's this idea that men are like one half of something and women are another half, and so there's an opportunity for conjunction there. The big answer of why for anything is, you'll see. I mean, that God has this great plan for everything, and He's like, orchestrating things, and that we're all the puzzle pieces that we need to be. That not just our gender, but everything about who we are is just the right fit somewhere, as we're talking about in these communities. And all that. So those are a few of my thoughts. Cara, did you have additional thoughts on top of those thoughts?
I think you about covered my thoughts.
Oh, nice. All right. Good. And I know you're just saying that because you made me look foolish on the last question. But we'll leave it there. But I appreciate hearing these questions, because it is good to think, and we can throw little things that Swedenborg has said out there. But I mean, go after it, think it, look at the world. Why do you think? And continue to ask the questions with your heart, and that's how with an attitude towards what's good for the human race, you can find great knowledge. So thanks very much for that. Okay, we've got another one, Regina on Facebook. I've been wondering if we are truly cut off from some of the healthy enjoyment we received in the physical world. I.e., if I have a favorite artist, I will not be able to hear their new album, or never be able to watch my favorite TV show. From what I understand, we have all we need on the other side, but it seems like we will not have the little earthly pleasures we once enjoyed. Yeah, man, because what if you die right before the last episode of that season, right? Are you just gonna, oh, I don't care anymore what happened? You know, how could, we got to be protected from something like that. Or yeah. So let's think about that. A couple of thoughts that I have are this. First of all, God is not into arbitrarily depriving people of things. So I wouldn't see, love and wisdom. As I was saying, this life matters, and the joys that people are getting from enjoying their favorite music and enjoying TV. I mean, God has got to be in there somewhere. So that's one thing I want to say. So why? So that I don't know if it's like you can like spiritually go to the iTunes store or whatever, but there's got to be some kind of continuation. Another thing that Swedenborg says is about that everything we find in this world has its origin in the spiritual world. Isn't that right, Cara? So there could be some kind of origin for this stuff there, right?
That's what he says. Yeah. So what's the origin of a TV show or music, for sure? I mean, he talks about, for sure, music in the spiritual world. He talks about entertainment and recreation in the spiritual world. I think there will be plenty. I mean, if you want to buy into what Swedenborg says, I think there will be plenty of pleasures in the spiritual world. We're not disembodied minds flitting about. We're bodies. We have relationships. We do stuff. We go places.
Yeah, and that he's two more things popped into my mind. I was listening actively, but these two things popped into my mind. I couldn't help it. One was that he's all about. There's actually the next chapter in this book is called "It's Not That Hard. It's So Hard to Live a Heaven-Bound Life as People Think," and he talks about sort of people in his day, and maybe some now think like, oh, self-denial, and that's how you get to heaven, but actually, we can enjoy everything in the world. It's just about priorities. It's about this usefulness and the common good is what is the most important thing in your life. But once that's in the right order, all this stuff below can come that can then be part of your healthy, happy life. And then also, Swedenborg talks about the same phenomena existing in the spiritual world as the natural world. He went to London, like the London in the spiritual world, and he even describes going to establishments and saying, "Do you have this kind of drink that they had in the physical world?" And they said they did. So that's a really obscure passage. Have you ever? It's in the Spiritual Diary, I think. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not run across that one.
Maybe I just made it up, but I think I really that's the problem with Swedenborg. There's so much of it, but actually I'm joking there because I know that passage exists. Just search London. If you get to like a Swedenborg search engine, you'll get to it eventually. So those are some thoughts on that. Thanks very much for the question. All right, let's take another one. Susan, YouTube. I had an NDE when I was 23. It is very peaceful, no pain. Was sent back, told I had much more to do. I understand now what was meant. Thank you for these videos. Well, you're very welcome, Susan, and thank you for being willing to share about your experience. And I know from what I've heard from other people who have had near-death experiences that those can be really foundational experiences. That can become a defining moment in your life. So to tell us all about it here, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And so let's take a look at the next one. This is from Simone or Simon on Facebook. I'm wondering whether Swedenborg said anything about whether we can mentally communicate with loved ones who have passed on by directing specific thoughts to them. For instance, if we regret that we did not understand them well while we were in the body, but that we do now. Oh yeah, man. So that kind of pulls at the heartstring of relationships, right? And this idea of wanting to make things right there. So, Cara. As far as I know, Swedenborg does not give a lot of specific information about how to reach out to the other side. Am I right or wrong?
You're right about that. He does not really talk about how we could communicate with our loved ones on the other side. And not in a personal way very much about how they could communicate with us either. Just more of a general influence. I think that my approach would be I would think that that person was getting the best kind of therapy, the best kind of angelic attention, that person would be growing and learning and changing and loving and forgiving. I would probably just want to be sending prayers up, like, please let my whoever know that I understand and I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that we got to do some of that. Like, this is what I think, because as we were saying before, when Swedenborg was writing, it may be that these kinds of not all these channels were open. After all, you described this new church, right, that he talked about, Cara. He says that back when he was writing, this all started going, so that there's this whole new connection happening now in the intervening time between heaven and earth. So there very much could be more communication now. And I would say, why, if you were an angel, which is a person who is totally full of love and gets the human experience, why wouldn't you want to try to connect those two people? Or if you were that person on the other side, anyone who's had a near-death experience knows, like, you understand the nuances of life so much more and all that. So why wouldn't you? So it seems like the will is there. So I'd say, yeah, keep talking, and I would think it would get through. And I've heard people who've tried to over and over send messages, and then hearing finally, like, okay, we got you. Don't worry, we got you. All right, so let's take another one here. This is from Regina. I must know, in your opinion, as you're an expert on Swedenborg. Okay, so this must be for Cara. Do you truly believe he encountered all he said? As far-fetched as it sounds, I really want to believe. Would love to know your thoughts. Do you truly believe he encountered all he said? Man, okay. Yeah, okay, so we'll go for all of my thoughts here. I would say there's a couple. I mean, I don't think he was lying, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I do think that he encountered what he said he encountered. As to whether he correctly interpreted every single experience, I don't know. How could I know something like that? But I do think that, and this is why. One is just interaction with material over an extended length of time. You start to see the self-consistency in it. You start to see sort of the insight and nuance in it. And this is not something somebody just thought up and threw out there. Also through what I would call sort of psychological application. He describes an internal world, spiritual world, and how it affects us and all that, and ways to navigate it. And when I try that stuff, it works in the mind. So that's something that has been really powerful for me. And then finally, corroboration with other experiences, which would be, that Raymond Moody, when he's researching near-death experiences, come across Swedenborg and says, wow, look at these guys are talking about the same sort of things. I can't, of course, vouch for every detail of it, but obviously I'm into reading it, and so I'm pretty affirmative. I've been impressed. I'm impressed. I've been impressed by the material, and continue to be. Another thing is, I've been poring over this stuff. Obviously, my life hasn't been that long, but I've been poring over it for quite an amount of time, in my estimation, and I continue to feel like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. This is cool. So those are my thoughts on it, Cara, as an expert in Swedenborg. What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is, why would he make it up? He published his first bunch of works anonymously, so it didn't seem like it was about making a big name for himself. He did eventually start to put his name on it, but like Curtis said earlier, he was not starting a church.
Not to mention, he kind of ruined his reputation. I mean, he already had a big name. He was a leading scientist. It was very well respected in the scientific world, and he started putting this stuff out, and that's why you've never heard of him.
Right. And he got in trouble with the big churches. He was famous for his science, his role in the science world, and this was a whole new direction that was risky for him to publicize. So I just can't think of a reason why he would make it up.
He didn't make money. I mean, he was letting the publisher keep the money. It just doesn't. There's no smoking gun like, oh, this is why he would do that. So, and he obviously isn't crazy, because while the things he's describing are way out there, he does it so meticulously and so rationally, and was able to write so coherently and back then, writing was a lot harder. There was no spell check, nothing like that. He had to do his own fair copy, etc., etc. So I would say those are a few good reasons for that. But everybody, take a look for yourself. Make your own decisions. We all got brains for a good reason. Okay, so now let's close it up this evening with a little bit on correspondences, as we talked about before. This is a segment where we kind of try to, this is an application sort of thing. We try to take this idea of correspondences and apply it. So correspondences is that the things in this world are images of spiritual realities or spiritual states. So we're going to talk about trees today. And he actually, as there are a lot of different kinds of trees, there are a lot of different meanings for trees. Cara, you actually compiled a little list of all the different things, or some of the things he said trees stand for. Would you mind reading that over?
Sure. Many references to trees corresponding to knowledges and perceptions of good and truth. And we saw at the end of our reading about the different kind of trees that were on the various pathways to heaven. And there's also a place where he describes a tree, that a tree corresponds to a human being, the tree to the person, him or herself, the wood of the tree corresponding to a person's goodness, the leaves of the tree corresponding to the truths that person understands, and the fruits of the tree being the useful things that that person does for the world.
So there you go. There's a bunch of stuff. The point is, put it all in your mind. The tree is an image of the mind. Somehow an image of the person. There's some reflection. Like, we're all all organisms are reflecting each other. So we have these trees. So we're gonna have like 45 seconds of tree footage or tree images, and just look with this sort of in mind, and just sort of quiet down and see what comes to you. Man, who doesn't think that trees are cool? Man, there's the variety of shapes and moods that trees can exude. That is hip. And one of the things, so why do I like Swedenborg? One of the things is that he started to dig into the spiritual side of trees and things like that. So everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with us. If you enjoyed it and want to kind of spread the show to other people, you can make a donation to the Swedenborg Foundation. It's a nonprofit group. We'll just help this reach other people and hopefully have some kind of positive impact on them. If you open up the description of this video, there's a little place where even you can make your $5 or whatever donation via PayPal. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks, Cara. Thanks very much for hanging out. It was a lot of fun discussing with you, and we appreciate you coming in even on a holiday to do this with us.
Thanks, Curtis. It was fun. Thanks to everybody who asked questions and joined the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. That was fun, and I look forward to reading over the comments when this is all over. And so, yeah, we'll be back live next week, and we hope that you'll be watching, and I hope you have a good week in the meantime.